Okay. 25?
You and Pat always do that. You pick like a time that is way too soon.
Yeah, but this one was on purpose. This one was on purpose.
Just to hurt me? Like
yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I'm feeling it. Okay, so welcome to another episode of That One Scene, where we pick a random scene and just kind of talk through it. And I've got two different options that I could pitch to our always esteemed co-host, guest, whatever we want to.
Yeah, strong, confident start, Doc. Well done.
Welcome to Mr. DC McNeil. And okay, I'm gonna let you pick because I want to talk about both of these, and they're both fun. So, okay. I got this idea after the most recent Daredevil episode I watched, where he rescues Claire and leaves all of the thugs alive on the floor, where they know her name, her face, her address. Yep. And so basically, at that point, I started thinking about Mace and Palpatine, and Mace was ready to kill the dude because he controls the Senate and the courts. There's no way you could actually legally judge this person. He's too dangerous to be left alive. Should Mace have killed Palpatine? Which I would then tie in with Daredevil and Batman and all of these people, or all of these heroes that consistently let the villains live with the consequences that are hanging out there. Second one being in episode 9, which I know you don't remember, but the very end when Palpatine is facing Rey and he screams out, "I am all the Sith," and she goes, "Yes, but I am all the Jedi." And both of those statements, there is so much to unpack right there.
I think that we should talk about Mace Windu because A, capital punishment is just like an interesting topic to talk about. But B, I would have to rewatch The Rise of Skywalker to know what you're talking about. Because I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, which I don't want to make you do.
So I think for everyone's mental well-being, let's not talk about the sequel trilogy. Is that what happens? I thought, didn't they get into a sword fight and then doesn't she like, isn't there lightning or something? I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that?
As is his temperament, he just starts shooting lightning at her. She's reflecting it with the sword, and she's only got the one sword up here, and he's like, "You cannot defeat me. I am all of the Sith." And then she force pulls Kylo's lightsaber to her behind her back and then whips it out in front of her, so she has two of them crossed in an X in front of her, and as she's doing so says, "Yes, but I am all the Jedi," and bam, now she's got two lightsabers, and apparently that reflects lightning, but one lightsaber doesn't reflect lightning. And then he can't turn it off once he turned it on, so he just electrocutes himself until he blows himself up.
Which you feel like he would have learned that lesson when he tried to electrocute Mace and got himself all fucked up. Like, is it just that, like, you can't... Is it a Sith... Is it like a pressure hose where if you turn the valve on until it's run through the certain amount, it can't turn off? Like, it's like...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I heard...
it's a set amount.
I heard a very... let's see if I could figure out how to say this more appropriately, because the joke was very dirty that it was like, for him, it was like a very sexual thing, and once he turns it on, he just can't stop because he physically enjoys it.
No, I don't like that. I mean, he's a weird little goblin man, so that kind of tracks. I think we can all commonly appreciate that Sheev is a little fucking freak. Okay, he's a little freak guy. So okay, Mace initially, when Anakin's like, "Yo, Anakin walks up to his boss in the workplace and he's like, "Listen, man, I don't know how to tell you this. You know this partner that we've been working with for like the last 20 years that's like deeply entrenched in our organization? He's actually working. He is the bad guys. That's crazy, right?" And Mace is like, "Yeah, okay, interesting. And you're like the most strong guy that we have. Okay. You go sit on the bench. I'm going to go deal with this." And then he gets all of his best boys together, or just the 3 cops that are near him, because they get murked pretty quickly, the dudes that Mace takes with him, right? Like, they don't last very long.
I believe, like canon-wise, that those three were supposed to be some that had fought like Dark Jedi or something in the past. So theoretically, they were the best of the bunch beside Yoda.
Well, can I tell you something? They super weren't.
Yeah, which
I saw Obi-Wan in that film fight General Grievous. I saw Obi-Wan and Anakin defeat Count Dooku. Those three chumps, they would get murked by Dooku in like an instant. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They don't have the caliber that you need to be in that room, is my feeling.
I'm such a like Star Wars nerd right now because I want to defend the characters because it's the fault of the cinematographer and the stunt coordinator, and most of all probably Lucas, because if he was changing around the fight scene, like he made them re-choreograph it so that Sam Jackson and Ian were actually the actors doing the action for most of it, because he didn't want the stunt people where you couldn't see their faces, quote unquote. And if that were the case, then I could see that he made them redo some of the other choreography where so that Ian like could be the one who was killing the three Jedi Masters, and it wasn't better action than it would have been otherwise. That being said, I do think that it's the way that they choreographed the fight, because the three Masters just kind of stand there and watch the blows coming at them. I did a little video on it where I like retimed a bunch of stuff. I had like the lights flickered to black, and then like in the black he moves so they can't even see him. And the novel does an incredible job of describing it. Like he is a just whirlwind of darkness, and nobody can track him at all. It's just a fury moving around the room. And like he appears behind the one he kills first is the guy that's actually psychic, which I didn't know until I was reading the book. The dude with the horns is like mildly psychic. And so you have to kill the psychic dude first as quick as possible, because otherwise he'll, I don't know, get inside your head or something. I don't know. But he just like appears behind him and like snaps his neck or something, just like instantly in the novel. And so like the way the action plays in the novel doesn't even translate remotely to how it plays out on screen. And which is how it should be, because these are like three of the top Jedi with battle experience in some flavor against force powerful people. So the fact that they went down so fast and that Mace's fight was not good, like for them to have died so fast, his fight with Palpatine should have been amazing to show the level that they were at compared to these guys, and it wasn't. So that was another problem.
Well, that. Well, or it needed to be really quick and definitive in either direction. Like, do you know, like it? I think that there's a way that you could do that to be like, and Mace is this much better than these guys and Palpatine, or Palpatine is so overwhelmingly strong that even Mace is not, you know, can't even stand up to this dude in any kind of capacity. Instead, I think you get neither, where it's like just this elongated, weird kind of sequence that doesn't really feel like it lands anywhere. And I feel like with the staging of what's happening, the idea is at the start of the film, Anakin executes Dooku because no one's looking and Palpatine's egging him on. And I guess in the Jedi, it's like you know, primary school rules. If you don't get caught doing it, it didn't count. So he executes Dooku. And one of the central questions of the story is like, what do you do with the Dark Lord of the Sith when you've identified him and you found him and you have him on the ropes? And like, Anakin chooses to kill him. Jesus Christ. Anakin chooses to not kill him for selfish reasons, but Mace has an opportunity to kill him and sort of doesn't, or is unable to, because Anakin obviously interrupts. And so I think that scene in particular, we've talked about this scene before, haven't we?
Our very
this is
first,
ridiculous.
Yeah, our very first episode was Mace out the window.
Yes,
but we didn't come at it from this angle.
No, this has only just occurred to me that we talked. That's so funny. I think that there is two ways to look at the scene. The first way is, does Mace Windu have a moral obligation to all of the things that Palpatine may or may not do if he's allowed to live. This is the like, should you kill baby Hitler question. See Looper for a very good example of this. Not to say a good thing about a Johnson film on a Star Wars show. And then that's one thing, right? Which is like the should you kill baby Hitler question. And I think the other one is from the Jedi's perspective, is it just according to their framework and their philosophies to kill Palpatine? Like, historically, are they killing Sith? Are they imprisoning Sith? Like, what is their, aside from Obi-Wan cutting Darth Maul in half, which turns out not to kill him, like, what is their relationship to capital punishment when it comes to these sort of perpetual forever opponents, right? I think that's like the other question.
Whether or not you want to, I know some people don't consider Clone Wars canon because it's a cartoon and whatever, but
Clone Wars is canon, and anyone that says otherwise is a fucking coward.
But when they have Ventress, when they have Dooku, even though they only hold them for like minutes usually, but they always try to take them into captivity. There's never a discussion I remember, except maybe from like the clones, that's like, we better put them down, sir. They're a little too strong for us to hold. This didn't work out the past 5 times, sir.
It's fine, sir. Just look that way, sir. There was an accident, sir. He fell down a set of stairs, sir.
But I don't know that it ever hit me so hard as when I was watching Daredevil yesterday, and like all of the bad guys are just slowly getting up off of the floor, and I'm like, they're going to go after Claire again. And this show is trying to make a big deal about how much good he is doing for the city, but he really isn't. Like, he took one guy that he put in a coma that they infer we see him die. So like one guy tangentially dies because of what Matt did, but
well, no, he gets murdered.
Yeah, but it was because of Matt.
Oh, wait, never.
Yeah, the brothers like stuck a epinephrine in him to get him talking, and then that killed him.
Yeah, I don't listen. Here's the cool thing about Daredevil. The show is exclusively about that question. You know, the whole first season, you're like, it really seems like he should kill these people because it really feels like letting them go is a mistake. Turns out the rest of Daredevil is exclusively about that question, so you're gonna love it. And other characters being like, dude, this is insufficient. Like, this project that you have is not working, and you know it, and we know it, and you need to do better. And you need to sack up and kill these people. And then you have other people, you know, the Angels of His Better Nature, in particular, Father Lantern, being like, hey, maybe don't do murder. That might be bad for you, possibly. But then I think the moral complication that Daredevil is able to get to as a storytelling kind of mechanism across its length is both sides of that equation are wrong in some big, compelling, complicated way. Like, Daredevil is able to go, here is a complicated moral question, and we are going to deal with it in a complicated fashion. Whereas I think just by the nature of being big and operatic, and Lucas's kind of 1,000 yards across 1 inch deep style of approach with Star Wars is like, you only ever get the big broad strokes of the paintbrush, right? You don't get into that nuance and that detail because it just isn't that type of thing. And so I think when you talk about should Mace kill Palpatine, I think it's also like, would Mace even think that is a wrong thing to do? Because based on what we know about Mace Windu, even if the Jedi were like, hey, don't kill people, Mace would be like, well, I didn't kill him, but I let him die? Like, he's that type of guy. Or he's like, well, I didn't kill him. He ran into my lightsaber. Like, I didn't kill him. Like, he is also that kind of guy in my mind. So I also think that there's another question there of like whether Mace would even think it'd be a wrong thing whether it would even clock on his radar as morally dubious, or if he just like, yeah, well, like, I gotta ace the fucking Dark Lord of the Sith, dude. That's just a Tuesday for me.
Yeah. And it's in like more caveats as you get into the novels, and with Mace's Shatterpoint power, and with his personal not necessarily beliefs, but where he places value. Like all of the value that he places is on democracy. For whatever reason, democracy is his thing, and there's nothing he loves more than that. And so the fact that Palpatine destroyed democracy and has built a dictatorship for himself, like I think that is supposed to be what actually broke Mace, like I don't know, emotionally, was that fact. And then knowing he can never, like, Palpatine can't be judged for this. He already has the power. There's no way to take it away from him.
Yeah.
Theoretically, we don't really know if all the Jedi had come forward and been like, you know, yo, this is a bad guy. He orchestrated the whole war. You know, we could try to prove it to you. Would the Senate have believed them?
And would that even make a difference? I mean, in our current moment, we have a pretty compelling answer, which is no. Like, you can get caught and everyone can be like, we saw you do it. And everyone can be like, and we convicted you for it. And so long as you have the brazen enough attitude, doesn't matter. And there will be maybe repercussions, as they say in Community, for this type of thing. But I also think, like, what did Palpatine actually do? Because we both watched the Clone Wars, and a lot of Palpatine's actions are like capitalizing on a moment, and then sort of spinning it as part of his plan the whole time. Like, a lot of his project is going, and you know, this is where I think the Clone Wars as a story is like, has a really compelling and canny understanding of the politics that Lucas was originally thinking about with the prequels, which was Bush Jr., which has a lot of, you know, allusions with our current moment, particularly in the US. The show has a very good understanding of, like, what would Palpatine have to be doing, and what decisions would he be making to come across to both his people and obscure himself from the good guys. What would he need to be doing in order to be taken as this kind of mysterious, perpetual genius leader that it's all part of his plan type of thing, right? And, like, it's all smoke and mirrors, right? We know that that some of the biggest projects of successful authoritarian, fascist societies and structures is mythology and the particular ways that you're able to lie and manipulate subjectivity, right? And Sheev, like, you can't, like, I in real life, it's easy to be like, okay, this person did these 12 crimes, these 50 sexual assaults, these 25 scams, these other 25 crimes, and then for some reason doesn't get in prison for any of that. But you can point to concrete examples. I think with Star Wars and with Sheev, it'd be really hard to, like, point to one crime, like, and be like, this is a thing Sheev did. Because Sheev is always, like, working through a middleman who's working through a middleman who's telling Maul what to do, or he's manipulating Obi-Wan to go to this planet so that he's got cover to do this other, like, or he's creating the Separatists and funding the Separatists, but, like, that's not technically illegal. Like, you know, I don't know. I think it would be a really interesting question to kind of figure out, like, could you even pin anything on this guy until that moment where he, you know, nukes those 3 Jedi and kills those. I mean, and, you know, I'm sure there is, but you know what I mean from, like, I just think it's a difficult academic exercise to be like, how would you even arrest him and what for? Like,
which is kind of a Wilson Fisk thing, because it's like, we don't even speak that guy's name. He doesn't exist. He's just a myth that's in the shadows, that's running everything, and nothing can ever be pinned to him because nothing is happening from him. It's all through these other middlemen, like you had said.
Right.
And it's interesting that also something that the novel does is that Palpatine is thinking ahead when the Jedi come in to arrest him, and he has an audio recording going, just audio, because then no one could actually see what's happening. And so he, like, granted, they didn't do this in the movie, so the fact that they wrote it into the book when it didn't happen on screen is a little but it makes everything kind of make a little more sense. So, like, he pulls out his lightsaber and activates it, and he's like, Master Jedi, what are you doing? Why are you activating your lightsaber? but it's his. And then he's
That
like,
scamp.
yeah. And then he's like, why are you attacking me? As he kills them, he's like, no, help me. As he's like running them through. So then like,
That's incredible.
Yes. Like playing that audio was part of his like proof to the galaxy that the Jedi were trying to take over, because he had like Mace's voice on the recording, you know, and all of this stuff. And
I think that's just proof that Star Wars would be way better if it was cyberpunk. Because like that's the most cyberpunk shit of all time. To be like, yeah, I'm specifically manipulating technology for a political, you know, a political output, which is technological determinism, which is materialism, which is proof that Marx was right. Thanks, cyberpunks. We appreciate you.
But what you had said about him not necessarily having a plan for everything and just kind of taking advantage, you even see that in the main films, because, and I don't remember if it was maybe episode 1 where he's like, why is Padme going back? This is too aggressive for her. And then it may be in that film where he says, we can use this to our advantage. Lord Maul, take blah, 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 and whatever after that. So, like, you could actually see him saying, okay, this is not what I wanted to happen, but now I know what to do to continue along the path that I was trying to get to. It's just I have to take a different route to get there. And like the thing with in Clone Wars where he by a workaround got government control of the banking system. Like all of that was something that he had orchestrated, but it was through other people, and the other people did the thing that he needed to happen, which was planned, but like how it happened wasn't something that he had planned necessarily, you know?
Yes, I think that's right. Yeah, it's like he has the intention, but the mechanism is frequently improvised.
And it's really interesting to think the characters of Dooku and Wesley in Daredevil are so pivotal. And it kind of makes me wonder, like, how successful would Fisk have been without Wesley or Palpatine without Dooku? Because Dooku was insanely rich, came from an insanely popular family, and was very well respected amongst everyone. As far as I know, he didn't like leave the Jedi in bad terms. I think he just was like, yo, I don't want to do this anymore.
I'm pretty sure that's, yeah, he kind of like, there's not like a big falling out. He just is like, I actually think I'm going to go do other things now because this institution is too limiting. Like it's not really like a big dramatic exit from memory.
You won't let me play with my gold. I want to wear my family jewels. I am rich. What is the point?
You frown upon the concept of money, and I love money. I'm a big money boy.
But that really hit me with Wesley, like how I don't know, competent he is. And
he's so good.
Yes, a beautiful character.
Wesley's the best character. He's so like I think you need a good, this is a lesson for anybody out there trying to run any kind of organization. You need a good 2IC, okay? Your number 2 in charge is critical in the success of your institution. And if you can get yourself a Wesley, you're set. You're good to go. What you don't want to do is end up with a 2IC who's like a dumb clown man. That's what you don't want, okay? This is a non-specific example to something that's happening at the moment. You don't want that. You don't want a big stupid clown baby. You don't want a rich baby idiot Nazi as your 2IC. But one of the things about Wesley, I think, and the Fisk relationship is that I think is different than the Sidious Dooku relationship is that there is like there's an implicit trust that Fisk has with Wesley, like to the point where like Fisk doesn't necessarily need to give Wesley directions. Wesley is expected to interpret what Fisk would want in any given moment. Dooku frequently has to kind of kiss the ring and take direction from Sidious, I think in a lot more direct and literal ways. And in particular, when you think about kind of Maul's involvement before the kind of Clone Wars kicks off, that's a very similar relationship where it's a very direct supervision. Whereas I feel that there's a lot more kind of implicit trust with a character like Wesley. I think you're right because of his staggering competence at the thing. Like Wesley is just like unabashedly, unbelievably good at crime. Like he is just a very good guy at this thing. in a way, I think that perhaps Dooku, in having those other interests and having that kind of diluted motivation, perhaps is less trusted. That's my reading anyway.
Well, a different way to read it would be that Fisk, at least in this first season, is just in the shadows. He is not running the entire galactic government like Palpatine is. So when Palpatine is like, Dooku, you need to do this, this, and this, it's because he knows of 50 other things on 1,000 other planets that are about to be happening, and Dooku doesn't because he can't, you know.
Right.
And he could take the time to explain it, but I mean, that would be the kind of story that only a few of us would appreciate.
Yes. Yeah, that's some real, like, if you're a Breaking Bad nerd where you're like, I love process and procedure, that would be like a show. That would be like a sicko cartoon. It's just the slow machinations of like Dooku's actual political engine as he picks through like different things. I mean, I've been rereading the Neuromancer, the Sprawl trilogy. I think I mentioned this yesterday. And that's a really interesting series of books because aside from the obvious foregrounding of technological determinism in cyberpunk, it's just like a fundamental foundational genre tool, it's like it underpins the genre, which is that technology can influence ideology. The other thing that series does really well is it imagines politics as it is in real life, which is this really complicated, kind of chaotic, like almost at times systemless series of inputs and reactions that different bad actors will try and coerce into narratives that benefit them. And I think you're right with Sidious. He doesn't necessarily feel a need to do that with his people because he's like, well, I'm the boss. You just do what I tell you. I don't need to explain myself to you. But then I think Fisk sometimes feels the need to explain himself to Wesley. Or they explain themselves to each other at times to build that trust and that rapport, which is why Wesley is such a kind of a foundational building block in Fisk's empire, or his, whatever you want to call his criminal project.
It's definitely different characters. It's so weird for me to say that Fisk is a better person than Palpatine is.
Yeah.
But I think in many senses, like, Fisk would actually care about his employees and try to take care of them and stuff. And Sidious, everything is just a pawn to him. Even his apprentices, they are only tools to continue the Sith line after him. And if they're not the proper tool for that job, then he's going to get rid of them and find a better tool. That's the Sith, mantra. So just from that perspective, it's interesting as well. And something I was thinking of, going back to like the entire original concept of to kill or not to kill, was me thinking of Anakin in the Clone Wars episode where he was having to, I don't remember if it was rescue Padme, but there was a guy that had a bomb on a ship. And he's like, if you come after me, I'm going to blow us all up and no one can do anything. And Padme and Obi-Wan are like, okay, we're putting down our weapons. We're not going to do anything. Anakin just runs him through. Just
kills him.
And both Padme and Obi-Wan look at him and they're like, why did you kill him? And he's like, what? He had a bomb.
Yeah, he was going to kill us. Do you know what? That's good math. I don't know what's wrong with you guys.
And I'm like,
that's such a great moment.
If he had, like, I know you talk a lot about how Yoda failed him when Anakin came to him and was like, I have such a big worry about this person. And like, if the Jedi, if he had been able to express himself better and Yoda understand him better, or if he had gone to Obi or if that had happened so that they actually gave him the emotional support he needed, when this comes around, he would not feel that he needed Sidious's knowledge to save Padme, because if he didn't feel he had the Jedi's knowledge behind him, because they were not letting him into, according to the book, they were not letting him into the archives because he was not a Jedi Master, which was the entire reason he wanted to be on the council, was to get in there, see the secret holocrons, and find whatever knowledge might be there in order to save Padme. So he thought, I have to get that from Palpatine.
Why? That's so fucking stupid. What? You don't need to explain that. Duh. Okay, just really quickly, just a fucking little soapbox for a minute. Okay, the I generally like novelizations. It's fine for Anakin's motivation to be a master, that he wants the prestige and respect from his peers that he continues to not get. That should be the motivation. He doesn't need like the fucking level 3 fucking swipe card to get into the archives to go research how to make wife immortal. That's so stupid. That that hollows out his character so much.
I agree with you and disagree with you, because I still think that should be in there, because that's the entire point of everything that he's doing is to save Padme. And so reframing it to focus on his internal struggle, it's not consistent with what he's trying to accomplish. Plus,
what do you mean? Yes, it is. He wants to, like, okay. Sorry. What do you mean?
Until he turns full evil, it doesn't become about him. At the very end, he's like, we can rule the galaxy together. I can make it how I want it to be. At that point, it's about him. Before that, everything is about, I have to save Padme. And
okay. Point of order. I understand I think that is correct, but it being about Padme is deeply selfish for Anakin.
True.
Because
love is selfish. It is.
Yes, but the way that relationship is not, I'm doing this for Padme. That relationship is, I do things for Padme so that she likes me and so that she sticks around. Like, and I realize it's every relationship.
Well,
but
no, it is selfish, because he literally says, I can't live without her. So it's saving her, but it's saving her for himself.
And so that to me is why it's not inconsistent, where like the prestige of becoming a Jedi Master means that he's on the inside of the council. He gets to make decisions and he gets to contribute to the Jedi Council and help dictate the course of one of the most powerful, standing sword-wielding space wizard monks in the galaxy, right? That gives him more influence and control, which means that he can exert more authority to keep him and his own safe, right? There's a kind of... Anakin has an inability to be civically minded, which I think is a requirement to be supportive of other people, right? He only cares that he and Obi-Wan and Padme are fine, and I guess Ahsoka in the cartoon, right? That's his only motivation, and I guess Cody and but like, wait, which one's Anakin's? Cody's Anakin's, right?
I think he's OB's. I don't know. There's Cody Rex. But regardless, the clone.
Yeah,
he likes clone.
You understand my point. Yeah, he likes his fleet commander. But I do you kind of see how, like, for me, that is how Anakin's character remains consistent throughout. He's never loving for the sake of loving. It's always a selfish endeavor because of the relationship with his mother and the kind of this big void at the center of him, which is this question of, like, the Jedi keep saying to let go of attachments, and every time Anakin lets go, he completely panics and he grabs on even tighter, right? He has like a real anxious attachment style in that regard, and it's a pattern for him, which is he grabs onto someone too tightly and squeezes them until they freak out because he's a weird, like, aggressive dude, and then he lets them go, and then he panics and grabs back even tighter, and it's just this cycle. And you see that in the Clone Wars with Padme, where, like, by the end of it, you're like, you two need to break up. This is awful. Like, y'all are so toxic. Like, and I'll just say it, and I'm sorry to have to be so fucking cross or whatever, but, like, Anakin just had, Anakin and Padme need to split up. Padme can do so much better. We meet so many other characters in that show that are, like, better suitors for her. And, like, I get it. She might just have good dick disease. I'm sorry. I understand that, but they need to split up. No matter how good the sex is, they gotta, like, go their separate ways. That's all you know what I mean? But my point is, yes, I think that then it's not inconsistent for me in that regard, because it is all pure selfishness. It's all about him and what he needs and his sense of respect and seniority and his sense of security. And so for me, that's why it's not inconsistent in the way that I think it can be for you if you read it that way.
I also would agree more if his character carried over a little bit more from Attack of the Clones, because several times in there you see him say something about his prestige, where he is like very obviously thinking about what other people think of him. But in Revenge, he seems a lot more sure of himself. And granted, he says like a couple things along those lines, but it doesn't have that same feeling for me that it's the prestige that he's worried about when, you know, you're talking about the temple scene, even though I'm sure that is what Lucas wrote it as. It's just very cut and dry. He was insulted that he was not given the status of master because he's the chosen one, blah blah blah.
It is pretty funny to be like to be like the Jesus of your like society and just like be like, I should get the promotion at work, right? This seems crazy. You guys, is this crazy? Should I not be getting this promotion? I'm fucking Jesus, dude.
Yeah.
Give me the raise.
Which would actually be a hilarious parody. So like he's up there and he's giving his pitch and like, I really think I should be on this council. And they're all like, fine, you could be on the council. You are like the Jedi Jesus. And then he gets his chair and he looks around and he's like, let's talk about Yoda. Dude's been here for like 800 years. He's not
so
the Jedi
long.
Jesus. I'm the Jedi Jesus.
What are we doing?
Why don't I take his spot?
He's the senior leadership team member who like starts that conversation of like, now we all like the CEO and founder, but let's explain. We're not just talking. We're just talking. It's just talking. I'm just saying we could explore some options. You know, we've had the same leadership for a long time, and it's just a conversation. Don't gotta freak out. I very much feel like Anakin has that conversation with Obi-Wan like once a month. Where he's like, this fucking Yoda guy. Every time I go to him for advice, he just blows me off, man. Like, it's so weird. And Obi-Wan would be like, yes, my apprentice, you mustn't give in to anxiety, for that is the path to the dark side. You must trust Master Yoda's wisdom. And Anakin would just be like, okay, but he's not giving me any. I ask him a question and he never answers my questions, dude. Like, and the thing that makes Palpatine so good as a villain is obviously there's this thing that happens in the background, which is he clouds the Jedi's ability to see the future, which I actually low-key think, and this might be in the novelization as well, I'm not sure. I low-key think that is where Yoda got a lot of his perceived wisdom from, is just sort of like casting a net into the future. And then when people ask him for advice, having some kind of precognition or some kind of predeterminism to give really good advice or to give really salient advice. And so like, yeah, I think it legitimately gets to a point where when Anakin's coming to him, because the Jedi code is so insufficient to deal with Anakin's problems, like he actually doesn't have any advice for him. And that to me is why I think he fails him. And that's what I was talking about is like, it's not just that, Yoda is unable to emotionally engage with Anakin, but it's also that Yoda doesn't have any advice for this dude because he doesn't have whatever mechanism he used to have to give advice. That doesn't exist anymore.
I was literally about to make the joke that Yoda maybe biologically can't empathize with Anakin because he's a different species and he's just like, what is love? Like Yoda's like, why are you upset? What is this emotion? I don't understand it. Everyone thinks it's like a Jedi trait and it's not. It's just the little goblin doesn't have feelings.
Or maybe he's like super ableist where he's like, this dude's a fucking cyborg. I don't relate to him at all.
But it really got me thinking. I wonder if this whole thing had played out like 50 years later or something like that, where like Palpatine didn't come on the scene until Anakin was already like legitimately on the Jedi Council and was like well established as like second to Yoda or even top, because Yoda's like, I can retire. We got Jedi Jesus. It's fine. And then how would Anakin have responded to the Clone Wars if he were in charge of the Jedi, if he saw Palpatine taking all of this power and then Order 66 happens under Anakin's watch. Like that's a fascinating idea.
That's kind of how the Clone Wars is talked about before the prequels, right? In the Zahn books, you get glimpses of it where it is framed like Obi-Wan and Anakin were these wartime generals together, and they were both at the height of their powers when all of this stuff happened and when it all broke bad. And like they bear the burden of responsibility for everything going wrong. And then they get sucked into these Clone Wars as a result of them failing during that, Palpatine's rise to power. And yeah, like I think it's one of the most compelling arguments for that first film, starting with Anakin being like a late teen. And you tell the story of the fucking Clone Wars. It's so insane that like the prequel trilogy is like, the most important sentence in A New Hope, which is like, yes, your father's laser sword. I fought with him in the Clone Wars. And then for it to be like, yeah, and that's the second film, and it's gonna be really boring, and no one's gonna like it. And then the third one's gonna kind of be the Clone Wars still happening, but the clones aren't the important thing. And also the clones aren't what we thought they were. I think in Zahn's imagination, he was like, he had this really cool conception of a bit like the conflict they try and instigate in Fallout 4 that I don't think works as well as they want it to, which is people are being cloned and like, you don't know who you can trust because you don't know if they're a clone that's working for the bad guys type of thing, which is like such a richer vein to me than like we bought an army off Craigslist. Like, do you know what? Like that is such a richer vein. And so of course Lucas didn't go for it because that's just not his style of storytelling, right? He wants it to be big and simple. And he goes, okay, stormtroopers are coming later. Let's do proto stormtroopers because that's a simpler version of the story that you could tell. And I'm not saying that he can't do nuance, but that is just not the kind of simplicity that Lucas prioritizes when putting those prequels together from my understanding. And I don't know, like I think that the morality of writing characters like Anakin Skywalker and trying to grapple with what is this dude's worldview is so impaired by the fact that like we meet him as like a fucking 10-year-old or whatever. Like that is it really undercuts and part of it's like a genre formation that hasn't fully realized, which is like the young adult novel doesn't really exist yet. That's like a kind of early 2000s. That's when it fully comes into fruition. Obviously, you get Wizard of Earthsea with Ursula K. Le Guin in the 80s, where you've got the kind of foundations of that. But you don't get your Harry Potters and things like that really prioritize that as a genre until after that first Star Wars film. And so you've got to imagine if they made that film 10 years later, we would start with like a 15-year-old Anakin, and we would watch him. And by the end of it, he'd be, by the end of the third film, he'd be like 20, 21 or something like that when he has to make this big decision. And I think the problem I have with the prequel trilogy when it comes to Anakin's character is exactly that, which is we meet him so completely unformed. The Padme thing is still weird. It's still just very weird given the age differences. And like, look, by the time that you're like 30, and she's 40, it's not that weird. But when he's 18 and you're 28, and when he's 10 and you're like, I don't know what, 18, whatever, 17, 18, it's not good. But yeah, I just think like from a characterological perspective, it is difficult to place Anakin on a consistent spectrum because you meet him when he's a kid who doesn't really have opinions yet about the world. Aside from I like car racing, like, which is every kid likes fucking car racing, dude. Oh, you like go-karts? What a unique personality trait. Interesting. Cool, man.
It's kind of interesting that that whole tirade started with you talking about the lightsaber that old Obi-Wan gives to Luke. And I don't know if you had ever heard it said that at that point, when Lucas had originally wrote episode 4, Anakin, Luke's dad, and Vader were different men.
Yeah, I do think I knew that.
And so it's I would almost have preferred that because
Darth undoing the greatest cinematic reveal in history,
right?
because it just rubbed him kind of the wrong way.
Well, I think that I don't know, there's more to play with. Like the only reason to keep it in is because it's this huge reveal and you have the drama of, oh, I can't kill my dad, and then the dad's like, I got no problem killing my son, so you got to work through this whole thing. But then does that really tie in as well with like the prequels? I don't.
What? Yes. What do you mean? Yeah, of course it does. It's all about fathers and sons. What do you mean? Anakin grows up without a father. His mother gets killed. He's an orphan. Obi-Wan becomes his dad brother. And then that doesn't work out. And then he gets a new dad, which is Palpatine. And then Palpatine makes him evil. And then he becomes an evil dad whose sons and daughters become the bastions of goodness in the universe. What are you talking about? It's all about dad stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, like if it was his dad's like best friend, wouldn't everything still play out pretty much the same? Like, you're my dad's best friend and you killed him.
Yeah, I guess so. But, you know, it's a cool reveal. I don't know what to tell you. I just cannot come on the other side of this argument because I just feel like I make so many arguments about Star Wars that people hate so much that if I tiptoe across this line, I'll never come back from it. And in like a year's time, I'll be like, yeah, I think the inclusion of laser swords was a mistake, actually. I think I would have preferred a blaster only universe. You know what I mean? Like, it's a slippery slope for me into being like all of Star Wars was a mistake.
I think the reason that I even broach that, like, I'm not sold on it, but I think the reason that it jumps out at me is because this happens so much in so many stories, like Murtagh in the Aragon series. Like, they're friends for the first book and then enemies for the second book, and then in like the third book you find out, oh, he's your brother. Because it wasn't enough to have all of this other stuff. You have to be related to the person. And that's like so common. If you want a big reveal and to up the drama, just make them related. And now there's extra drama for no reason.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's an easy cop out, I guess, from a writer's perspective.
Yeah, I think you're right. I actually completely agree with that. I think that's completely right. I guess the thing that I'm thinking about is there's one. I'm going to have to say this carefully because I don't want to spoil anything for you. There's a reveal at some point in Daredevil that is using similar mechanisms that works incredibly well. Like to the point where it's like staggering in how effective it is. But I think that the way that works in the way that you're talking about not working is it doesn't just reveal it to up the stakes. It then goes, okay, and now we're going to deal with this properly. And this is going to become a big thing that the story becomes centrally about. I think where it struggles to land is when the reveal, like, okay, don't get me wrong. Aragon is not a good series of books. It's pretty poorly written. Story's bad. I don't like those books at all. That's just my opinion. I understand a lot of people love those books. Nothing against them, just like stories that aren't for me. That's all it is. Just a purely taste thing, disciplinary interest thing. Not for me. Those books constantly are like, they have like the Dragon Ball Z problem of like, well, once you fight one dragon, how do you up the stakes in the next book? Bigger, stronger dragon? Okay, but how do we up the stakes with a villain? Bigger, stronger villain. Okay, we've already done that. What if he's your brother? It's like, I guess, like, I think that becomes like a power creep issue as much as it is like a genre question. But
and I don't remember.
Yeah, you make a good point.
If you don't remember the big villains dragon, because you were making the jokes about bigger, stronger, like when they get to the big dude's dragon, he has used magic to augment his dragon so that it is so big that Saphira is like, her whole body is the size of his like pupil. Like,
see, this is what I'm fucking talking about. This is what I'm talking about. The contrast with something like Wizard of Earthsea, where like within the first, I don't know, 5 chapters, like the main character goes and kills like 8 dragons. And like he never faces a larger like physical threat than that throughout the rest of the series. There's obviously different threats that that Ged kind of deals with throughout that kind of series of books. But like it is able to free itself of the requirement of that escalation by making the stakes more and more personal, or by bringing in new characters and helping us understand their perspectives and their stakes, and making the stories deeply personal. Like those stories become really deeply about like, what does it mean to be a person who, at a very early age, is introduced into like a monastic school of sorcery, right? Consider the parallels here with Star Wars. Is sort of put on this pedestal throughout their life as like this great doer of deeds, this person who is important and has great destiny ahead of them and has to sacrifice their personal life. Well, what does that mean when you get to like retirement, 40, 50, and you realize that you haven't really like had a life? You haven't really like had any real relationships. You don't have a family, and then what do you do, and how do you go and forge a family? And they're really, really beautiful stories for that reason, because they deal with the fact that like, you can have this great destiny, but like, what does a personal life look like, right? And how do you deal with that? And those become the most important stakes of that series, and it helps them avoid that problem of escalation. And even when you do get reveals of like, oh, these people might be related, it's never like they might be related and that's the drama. It's like they might be related and now we have to deal with that. Oh crap. Okay, well now what? And then it complicates things rather than, it never feels like a twist. It always feels like a natural complication. And I wonder for a thing like the dad stuff and the reveal there, I think that what it adds is worthy of its inclusion. I think what is done with it in the prequels, this is where I'm agreeing with you. I think what is done with it in the prequels is insufficient at holding up to its inclusion. Like I don't think that the prequels do enough with it. Is my general feeling.
Oh, I had like so many different points based off of all of that. Anyway, I guess wrapping up because we're about on the hour. Getting back to the original topic, should you kill people? An interesting thought was Lord of the Rings, where a pretty big theme was it was mercy that stayed Bilbo's hand, which allowed Gollum to continue to live even though he caused problems, probably killed people, but was the catalyst for the ring actually being destroyed. And so showing mercy and not killing the bad guy is literally what saved the entire story and the entire realm from Sauron. So
yeah, and leads to one of the greatest scenes in cinematic history, where Frodo's like they're sitting they're in the mines of Moria, and Frodo's like, I think we're being followed. And Gandalf's like, yes, that's Gollum, a tragic figure. And then Frodo goes, yeah. Frodo's like, well, I wish Bilbo had killed him. He goes, oh, would you be so eager to deal out death and judgment? And then Frodo's like, look, I just don't want to be here like this. I wish this has never happened to me. And Gandalf goes like, so do all who live to see such times, but that is not for us to decide. It is only for us to decide what is due with the time that is given to us. It's so good. Okay, goosebumps. Yes, and I think that the Lord of the Rings, which is really interesting because, right, the central moral question of the Lord of the Rings, and indeed the Silmarillion to a larger extent, is like, this ability to have mercy and this ability that men have specifically to overcome their fundamental flaws and to do things like mercy. And I'm saying man as in like the Numenorian race of men, because it's Lord of the Rings is a very specific version of what that means. But
sexist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What can I tell you? They're from the land of Numenor, dude. Like that's... it's not my fault that Aragorn's a Dunedain. Like, I don't know how to help you. Yeah, those books have some interesting race science in them. But like, yeah, I suppose the question there is, it's also Frodo's mercy of Gollum and treating Gollum with respect that is ultimately what allows them to get to Mordor and to cast the ring into the fire. And Gollum's inevitable betrayal is only possible because of Frodo's mercy as well. And that is ultimately what ends up destroying the ring is Gollum's betrayal and Frodo's mercy, because Frodo lacks the strength to actually cast the ring into the fire. And so I think the story pretty conclusively is like, yeah, like mercy is really important, and like not killing things that you deem to be bad or different or corrupt is like a courageous and like a good thing and a valorous thing. I don't know. Mace Windu not killing Sidious is a very different question than Bilbo not killing Gollum, right?
Yeah. He still should have murked Palpatine in my mind. There's no way around it.
Palpatine is so... Listen, I don't advocate for political violence.
Killing old men? Yeah, really?
But, however, I think given the context of everything that Mace Windu knows about the Sith, I think given the context of the shit that the guy in front of you that you're fighting is saying to you, right? And I think that the knowing Palpatine's position within the Senate and within the galaxy, unless you take him out, I don't know what other recourse, like what other options you have. I don't know how else you stop this guy other than you. Okay, the equivalent for my mind in long-running serialized fiction is Negan in The Walking Dead, where in The Walking Dead TV show, one of the questions once they defeat Negan is everyone is like, Rick, you have to kill Negan. Rick, you have to kill Negan. Rick, if you don't kill Negan, you've betrayed every one of his victims. Rick, you gotta kill Negan. And you know what Rick refuses to do? Is kill Negan. He's like, I won't do that. Because that makes us one of them. And so I think the counter argument from the Jedi's perspective is if you kill Sidious, you are crossing some line and you are using the tools of the Jedi to kill this guy, and in some way that makes you closer, that makes you like them in some ephemeral way, right? Like, should you morally probably kill Sidious? Yeah, I think so. But then, it's like any of these stories, right? You go from a question of mortality into a question of damnation, right? Where the stakes are larger than life or death. It's no longer about whether Matt Murdock will kill Fisk. It's if Matt Murdock kills Fisk, he will damn himself. But if he doesn't, he's damning everyone else. And that is like where the juice of these stories is. That's where the flavor is. That's where the texture is. And there is so much that could have been done with that Mace Windu Palpatine exchange and the build up to it and the context of it that could have pushed it into that space. Like it could have been one of these moments that we talk about, right? There's a moment in Daredevil that we all talk about in season 3 where it's like, that was they built up to it, and it's the pinnacle of the show, and it's the best, it's the most earned moment of the show. Sidious and Mace just isn't that, right? What is that is when Anakin walks into the room and Mace has the laser sword over Sidious, and he's like, Mace is talking about it. He's like, Anakin, da-da-da. And Hayden Christensen's acting and the particular takes that they end up with in the final version of this. I've said this a million times, but I'll say it again. Every time I watch that scene, there's this small part of me that thinks Anakin will make the right decision. And I know how the film goes, but that's how compelling Anakin is in that moment. And it's just that the stuff before it isn't there for me, right? It's not there for me because we don't have enough Mace Windu making decisions on screen before this. We don't know enough about him as a dude in these films. Obviously, we as Clone Wars and Star Wars people know a lot about Mace, but it's just not a moral dilemma. It's a vehicle to get Anakin to cross, right? Like there's no, it becomes a throwaway single-use tool instead of a multi-purpose part of scene work. And I think that for me is where it fails to earn the moral complexity it could otherwise have.
And probably the biggest part of how you would answer that question, meaning, yes, this person should have been killed versus no, Smeagol was not worthy of. So he was a like tortured, meaning Smeagol was like a tortured character that they still saw light in some fashion. Why they did, we don't necessarily know. But does Palpatine have that? No. My same argument would be with all of the guys, the Russians that kidnapped Claire in the last episode I watched. Like, there is nothing redeemable that we see there, and showing them mercy in that instance just leads to more violence. But if you look at Batman, where so many of the villains that he is fighting are mentally disturbed, at least they're written to portray, being mentally disturbed in some fashion. Then you get into an area where you're like, okay, these people need to be treated differently, just like Golem is treated differently, because there is something wrong with them that we might be able to fix. They're not inherently evil at their core like these mobsters or the Sith Lord is.
But how does that sit with Fisk then? Because one of the things about Fisk that really fucks you up the longer you watch that show is like, I don't know how far in you are, but like you start to get the impression that like Fisk is actually a complicated, complete person. He isn't just pure evil, and he's capable of acts of contrition and passion, and it helps that he has a sophisticated persona. But then the longer you get into it, the more you realize like a lot of who this person is deeply informed by trauma. And same with Matt Murdock, obviously. And that's why it's such a brilliant show. And same with Karen, is like those 3 points of the triangulation are how the story finds its themes and talks about its themes and makes those subjects realized in the text, is by going, we have 3 characters that are deeply informed by trauma, and how they choose to work through that trauma, e.g. Matt Murdock punching dudes and really enjoying it, and having to pretend that he doesn't enjoy it, but knowing secretly he really, really does like hitting people. Karen, who puts herself in increasingly dangerous situations to try and do the right thing, but in a very real way. It's just doing the same thing that matters, which is like putting herself in dangerous positions because it makes her feel like she's contributing something to society. And then Fisk, who his response to his trauma is to control reality. And if he can just become the dominant force that controls New York City, then nothing can hurt him and his people, and he'll finally be safe, and he'll finally have achieved everything his father couldn't. And that forms the crux of that show. And yeah, like I think you can look at Fisk and be like, this is a guy who could be reformed. I think the reason why Gollum gets that treatment is like Gollum at his heart is still a hobbit. And like there's something we were talking about like race science before. There is something in Tolkien which fundamentally views hobbits as good. There is something about hobbits that are like indelibly good creatures, or they are saved from the corruption of Middle Earth because they're not men. They have that elven lineage in them, and they're not dwarves. They are this other separate thing that is like innocent in some way.
Yeah, they were written to be pure in a way that no other race was written to be, so that they were like the moral compass of the entire story. So it is interesting to say that, Gollum, still being of that breed, still carries that moral compass in some fashion.
Yeah, even if he's a little fucked up gremlin guy. Yeah. Can I tell you a funny thing before we finish? So the in the original D&D, I think it was the D&D printing, it was like edition 2, I think, which was when they introduced the halflings, which is their version of hobbits. They were originally called hobbits, and the Tolkien estate was like, absolutely not. That's absolutely not. Those are ours. And they were like, fuck, they're short. They're about half the size of a normal man. What should we call them? Halflings. Perfect. Printed.
Except halflings is also used in Lord of the Rings.
I know. Well, that happened later. That was after D&D. So, Ouroboros eating its own tail there. Yeah, that is interesting, isn't it? I think that, well, I guess by the time that... by the time they were making the films, D&D had been around, so halfling was in circulation. I just thought that was very funny as like how do you get from hobbit to halfling?
Well,
But yeah,
I mean, it's a Lucas style naming thing. It's laser sword. It's on the nose. Half a man. I don't know.
yeah, these short folk. Like, what do they get called in the Prancing Pony? Little folk. I always feel like that's really demeaning.
Well, yeah, it was, but it was also like they were kind of like kind about it.
That's well.
Like,
I mean, they were
hey,
used
little
to.
buddy, what are you doing down there? You know.
I mean, they're used to hobbits. Like, they're only like there's another hobbit village, like literally like the next town over. It's not like they're not used to hobbits. I know way too much about Lord of the Rings.
Brandywine Bridge, 20 miles.
Yes. Which actually in the books,
Actually.
it's not important. It's not important. It's not important, but it's not where it's not Brandywine is. That's where Mary lives. That's not the. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They've remixed it for the films. It's fine. It's an adaptation.
I really respect that, by the way. You calling out the directions in the book that they got wrong in the movie.
Well,
like, no, that massive respect.
Well, because it's a plot point in the book. Anyway, it doesn't matter. They can't cross. We can't get into it. We can't get into it. The one last thing I want to say, because we can go longer than we wanted to here. Shocking how unlike us. Is I don't know. I think I was like, oh, we'll do a quick one. Just never gonna.
And I said, if it's quick, I'm a Teletubby, and I ain't a Teletubby.
Which is a thing no one's ever said.
I know. Yeah, it was a
not
first.
a saying.
It was a first.
It's not an aphorism. Yeah, Darth does it all the time. I think there is another question that I would pose to people to think about in fiction, which is a lot of the time when you have a moral dilemma, that moral dilemma is either completely extracted from the context that it's in, so something really like universalized, right? I saw it was George R. R. Martin who was giving a lecture at a university, and it was written up by one of these outlets that just it's like a junket where they just anytime he sneezes they have to write an article about it, like it's that type of thing. Really like difficult journalism to do because you're just basically pumping out shit every day. And the article was like talking about Martin and his discussion of allegory and Tolkien, and Martin was saying, I don't like it when people allegorize my books. I don't like it when they read my books as metaphors or whatever. An obviously stupid thing for Martin to say, who is famous for writing one of the most allegorized, like long form, like fiction series on the planet that literally takes historical events and then fictionalizes them. Like just an unhinged thing for him to say. Truly wishful thinking from Martin on that one. But the thing that I thought was interesting in that is the author has a throwaway line at the end where he's like, even if Martin doesn't like it when people metaphorize his books, I think we can all agree that there is, truly great stories. There's always some element of universality to it, which I think is bullshit. I think that's like completely wrong. I think there's like a wrong instinct to have. I think this idea that like great works of fiction have something, that inherently always it can be universalized. I think it's just like utter nonsense, right? The great works of fiction are specific and they are arresting in their focus, and they have something they are trying to do and say about something. They have a subject, and then they say things about it, which is how you develop theme, right? And when talking about this question of like whether you should kill Sheev, and whether Windu should do this act of violence, I think it is very easy for people to essentialize that question as either pearl clutching and being like, well, obviously killing someone is always wrong, which I think is the universalizing instinct, or they will work backwards from the assumption that the beliefs and institutions in the fiction make a thing right or wrong. I often talk about the fact that like I think the Jedi are like a pretty bad, dangerous institution. And like the way I view the Jedi is very different than the way that Darth and Raya view the Jedi. To me, they are like a deeply insidious and corrupting force, and I like that. I think that's a really interesting part of the Star Wars franchise. But I think it's very easy to look at a question like this and do what someone has done on this. I guarantee someone clicked on this, didn't watch it, and just wrote in the comments an answer to the question that's in the title. People do that constantly to Star Wars content that we make. And it drives me fucking nuts because Star Wars is one of the few franchises that engenders passivity when it comes to like academic discourse and the kind of media criticism of the Star Wars vehicle. People are so ready to essentialize and go, well, the Jedi are good and therefore da da da, or like the Jedi are bad and therefore da da da, or like obviously you should have killed them because blah, blah, like what I guess my closing point here is, hopefully, if you made it this far in, it has encouraged you to engage in good faith with these academic questions that happen around Star Wars. And hopefully, the next time one of these comes up, you don't have that knee-jerk reaction to just be like, well, it's this answer. Like, I just hope that this engenders some more of that, because that's always the exercise, I think, when talking about Star Wars, is trying to open the aperture when so much of the fan community is about closing in the aperture and limiting the possibility space of what can be talked about and how it can be talked about and who has an authority to talk about these things. And those are instincts that I revolt against and that I find unhelpful. You know?
That is going to play so well in the one of the other 2 scripts I'm working on. So thank you for that.
Apparently, I'm happy to be of service.
I'm also over here giggling that 5 years ago, you literally looked at me in shock and said, "What is a sheev?" And now you're throwing out the name like it's nothing.
Bro, I'm so Star Warsed up now. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, you guys have ruined me. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. You guys have, I know so much about Star Wars now that, like, I've watched Clone Wars, Rebels. I've read the Zahn books. I obviously have watched Andor like 5 times because I am good to myself sometimes. I get to watch stuff I like. My number 1 listened to podcast last year was a Star Wars podcast. I listened to more of Shelved by Genre and A More Civilized Age than any other podcast, in some ways because of runtime. You know, they do very similar length episodes. We do like 3 or 4 hours, but I just know a lot about Star Wars now, and I am cursed with that knowledge. You know, I just have to walk around with it.
So I ruined you in a good way, where now you're enjoying something that you weren't before, and you ruined me in the opposite way, where I can't enjoy crappy movies anymore.
Yeah, I can ruin anything. That's my superpower. You spend too long with me, and you're like, everything's bad except for like 2 TV shows.
Just gonna talk about Daredevil and Breaking Bad for the rest of our lives.
Oh, 100%. Well, Pat is threatening to, he keeps threatening to do it, but we're talking about doing Better Call Saul on A Method to the Madness in the same way that Pat and Mitchie did Breaking Bad. So like doing an episode of podcast for every episode of the show, which I'm very excited about, but we'll take the rest of our lives because there's 5 seasons of that. And there'll be like at least an hour of discussion per episode. So, but I'm very excited about that. And yeah, also, what's wrong with talking about Breaking Bad and Daredevil for the rest of our lives, Darth?
I'm enjoying the heck out of Daredevil right now, so nothing at all. And I have not let myself get addicted to Breaking Bad yet, so that'll have to be. It's
a future problem.
Yep, future project right there. Okay, we talked yesterday. Anything to pitch since yesterday?
Since yesterday, gosh, no. You guys know what it is. ZeroIndent.com for everything I do. I don't have anything big coming up. Well, obviously we've got. If you liked hearing us talk about Daredevil, you can go over to Zero Indent on YouTube or wherever you find podcasts. Just type in the Zero Indent review, it should show up, and you can listen to our full. Me and Pat are doing a full analysis and coverage of Daredevil, the Netflix TV show, and very soon we will have Daredevil Born Again coverage coming out that Darth is being press ganged into. And then I've got a new project coming up very soon, which is something we've been wanting to do for a while, which is I'm going to get Danielle and Sam, who has been on this show before, on to play through some of the best computer role-playing games ever written and talk about the writing in those video games. And Pat is being our guinea pig for the first season, so he hasn't played the game. We'll be playing Pentiment, which is very exciting. It's one of my favorite games of all time. So that's my kind of big exciting thing that's coming up. But yeah, zeroindent.com, patreon.com/zeroindent, underink.press. URLs, Darth. We got all the URLs today. We got them.
Yep, they'll be down in the description, assuming I remember to do that. And I am not pitching anything because I already have said the past 18 recordings what I'm working on, and that hasn't changed. So thank you for joining. Goodbye there, and high five.
Wait, hang on. Wait. Hang on. It's hard. Oh, I need to go more that way. That perspective really fucked me up.
I know.
Because you're way closer. So it's like suddenly forget how cameras work.